I believe that we're live now.
Okay,
Yes.
well, welcome to the Node.js Foundation Technical Steering Committee meeting for January 17th, 2018. We'll follow our standard agenda. So first thing on that list is if anybody has any announcements for the rest of the team. Okay, I'll take that as that there's no announcements, so we'll move on to the issues that were tagged for TSC agenda across the repo. The first one is issue number 469, titled Moderation Access in the TSC repo. I can take this one as I open the pull request itself. This is a follow-on to the discussion we had last week where there was a PR open to bring the documentation of who had organized org ownership for the Node.js organization closer in line to what we actually do day to day. That landed last week, and so this is a follow-on that adds access for the moderation team. And the reason for adding them is that, they need that access to be able to effectively carry out the moderation activities. There has been discussion around whether we can, provide the access they need through other forms, automation, GitHub bots, whatever. But at least my feeling is that, we shouldn't be blocking on that. So we should still work towards making putting that in place, and so we can reduce access in the future, but we can't really, it's been long enough that we shouldn't stand in the way of the moderation team being able to do their job any longer. There has been some discussion and conversation in the issue itself. I don't think I've seen anybody show any concerns in this specific issue, but there had been concerns in previous discussions, so James added it to the agenda to make sure that everybody, on the TSC was aware and that we had an opportunity to discuss to see if, we need more discussion and time or whether people are okay with this land.
In particular, Rod, I know you had mentioned in a different thread some concerns about opening it up to the ownership rights to the moderation team. So I wanted to at least give you a chance to see whether you are good with this or you have objections.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to hold it up. I've said my piece. I don't particularly like it, but we have moved private stuff out.
So if everyone's good with it, I'll go. If everyone's fine with it, I can remove my -1.
I don't know if anyone knows the answer to this, but does anyone remember the time where was it the Node School org got temporarily deleted? Have we ever tried to follow up with GitHub to see if they've improved their backup stuff for that, in the event that anything did happen? I'm not sure if what they changed from that. I don't know. Maybe it's not really a concern. I just wondered if anyone knew anything about that.
I would say it's a concern anytime we're adding owners. It just increases our attack surface area. So it's definitely something that we should be concerned about. Not to say that any of the specific people might be malicious, but if those accounts end up getting compromised, it just makes it that much.
Yeah, I agreed. We should continue to work to come up with ways we can limit the total number of people for sure.
Look, I will say so far, I'm impressed by the professionalism of the moderation team. I think they've conducted themselves quite well and very measured. So my concerns about the particular individuals involved is minimal. It's more about organizational going forward, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Anna in the chat that it's not really easy to do that accidentally because of how the GitHub UI is nowadays. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think The only other thing we tried to do was, you know, in the PR, set the expectation is that, you know, the moderation team members are going to limit what they do to just what they need for moderation, nothing else. So I'm hoping that, again, you know, if you're not poking around in other areas, hopefully that also limits the opportunity for doing something that would cause a problem.
Yeah. I do think that at some point, if no one else has, I mean, maybe I will contact GitHub again and bug them about getting more tools in there for this kind of thing in the future. But this is what we have for now, so seems good.
Okay, so is there any more discussion on this front?
If we haven't done so already, can we require that all anybody with owner access at least has two-factor enabled?
That's fair.
I'm close to 100% sure that everybody on the moderation team already has two-factor authentication enabled, and I don't have any problem with that. And we're going to be doing that for the entire org in the very near future anyway. So yeah, I don't think that's really a problem.
So who's gonna? I mean, what do we need? What's the action on that front, and who's going to have the action in terms of we just need to check whether they have UFA? Or?
I'll take the action item of checking that everybody on the moderation team has two-factor authentication and communicating to them that that is an absolute requirement.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, we'll
probably need to document it in the policy somewhere.
Yeah, we should document somewhere that, you know, that's an expectation on all of the TSC moderation, whatever the.
I don't think that's really necessary. There's the TSC has already approved requiring two-factor authentication org-wide. We just haven't done it basically because there's like 2 people I don't want to auto kick out by turning it on. We can talk about that during the private segment and how to get closure on that.
That's a good point. Okay, so it sounds like we're okay to move forward on this. You'll just double check that they have two-factor authentication, and once it lands, we'll wait for that check before we actually add them as org owners. Sound good?
And, feel free to remove my big red X from that issue.
Okay.
Hey, Michael Dawson, did you make the notes minute? If you did, can you please lock it to only us to edit?
That's going to be like I have automation which creates these, and the only easy way I could find to make them editable is through making a directory where anybody can edit the files. So I'll have to think about how I can do that.
Yeah, this really isn't working. People are, I can't tell who's messing up the minutes right now, but this is not okay.
Okay.
Maybe we should just only share the link to the minutes doc in the chat for the meeting.
Yeah, change it. Just lock it out right now because somebody is messing around with it.
Okay, I can do that. It certainly hasn't been a problem yet. Let's see.
No, it's absolutely a problem right now.
Okay, I'm going to right now, and then trot. Okay, Rich, which email, Rich, should I add to invite you?
I'll type it in the chat here.
Okay, thanks.
There you go.
Okay, you should get an invite to be able to edit.
If you can post the link to that document in the chat for us to view, for those of us to view.
Separate. Okay.
Shouldn't kick you out. It shouldn't have kicked you out. It's the same doc.
Yeah.
Yeah, just convert it to view only.
That's all I did. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was a bit confused there. Sorry.
All right, so
Okay.
we'll do the action item to make sure to and PR is good to land. Okay. All right.
Okay, so the next one on the agenda is the Enterprise Advisory Group, number 431. I know there was some discussion of this last week, so I don't know if we should have just removed the TSC agenda or we need more discussion this week.
I'd say, personally, I'd say remove it. We're going to organizing the next meeting for the advisory group, so it can actually get together and kind of put together some of the things that were asked for. So there's really nothing to do until then.
Right, and I assume there's issues in the user feedback group, or will be, in terms of those arrangements.
Yeah. Trying to get some ideas of when the people are actually going to be available first.
Okay, so removed it from the agenda. The next issue is our standard review of the strategic initiatives. Again, a reminder to people, just if they can add in their updates ahead of time, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll go through them in the meeting. In terms of the NAPI work, no update since last week. Still working on the, moving towards getting out of experimental. And we're continuing. The two main things are showing real world use and talking about how Node pre-chip will work. So that's ongoing. In terms of the list, let me just pull that up and we can walk through it. Oh, sorry. 423, I got that wrong. Okay, so James, HTTP2, anything new or to discuss on that front?
Nothing discussion worthy. 9.4 went out with a number of very significant updates that have been sitting in master for a couple of weeks. It's just ongoing stuff, just finishing up, test coverage and making sure there's no major bugs. So.
Okay. Error messages, anything new on that front?
We've made some progress recently, thanks to Joey. We're just chugging through the errors that are in C++ land and getting those converted as much as possible. So.
I see you opened the tracking issue to kind of say, here's how to get started. And so if anybody's listening and wants to help out, that go check out that issue as a way to get going.
It's not a good first issue for first timers. It is a complex set of issues involved. So if you want to take a look at it and work on it, just you have a couple mentors that are available to help.
Core Promise APIs?
Making progress. So working on the files on the FS module first. Part of this is dependent on some internal changes at the C++ layer, just to kind of encapsulate things a bit more. It's ongoing. We're still a ways off.
Okay. And the new Stream APIs, I guess that's you, James, and Jeremiah?
I'll leave that to Jeremiah. He's done the most work recently.
Yeah, we're getting so I've gotten a bunch of more of the JS sort of prototyping done. So there's a working zlib transform there now, and we're probably gonna work on some sort of like buffer pooling, or at least I am for now. Work on some buffer pooling stuff for that to sort of show that off once it's a little bit more complete. And then we're also gonna work on some C++ APIs to demo that, and then probably sometime in the future bring that back around to the org for like a more wider consensus sort of thing or whatnot.
One thing that Jeremiah did do is here's a repo where we're working on this, where we got documented some of the working assumptions / requirements what we're doing. I don't know, Jeremiah, if you want to share that the URL to that repo in the chat. I'm not sure if you had a public yet.
Yeah, I can do that.
It might even
just
be,
so folks can
yeah,
follow
is that linked off of the issue 1614?
It might be.
Yeah, there might be one in there. This one in particular is going to be a bit of a long-term initiative, so it may be a while before we have anything super concrete.
Sure. Yeah, we don't. Sounds good. Just it's good to have the links there if you can. Next thing on the list, so just going through the list here. We don't have miles today, so I guess we'll skip modules unless anybody else has any insight.
There has been a significant PR about the named exports that people might want to check out, with some interesting discussions happening around the. Yeah, go ahead.
This is actually one. This is one that there's actually some significant debate about. And I flagged it specifically for a TSC agenda because I think at some point we're going to have to make a decision on this. In order to be able, basically, in order to be able to support named imports of from core modules, there are decisions we're going to have to make with regards to underscore prefixed properties, mutable properties that sit on the module itself. For instance, crypto default encoding. And our deprecation strategy. Basically, if we cannot, with ESM named imports, we will not be able to use the getter pattern to deprecate access to a property or function. We will only be able to use like util deprecate with if we are exporting functions. So there are a couple of significant impacts to our API that moving to this model will be. And if we land this PR as is, either parts of the core API will be broken, limited, or inaccessible.
From ESM or?
From ESM.
Right, okay. Do we want to discuss that now or
No.
wait till we get to it on the agenda? Okay. I guess going through the other, so let's see. Okay, I'm looking at OpenSSL evolution. So Rod, anything on that front?
Look, I'm overdue getting something up for that. I just had a lot of personal stuff going on in the past week and a bit, so I'm quite behind. But we really need to get our heads around it for version 10, and we don't have good information from upstream. I've been trying to get that from the OpenSSL folks regarding their LTS strategy. They're lagging, which kind of sucks for us. So we may end up having to take a stab in the dark on best guess and adapt during version 10. I'll try and outline that in a way that's grokkable. I'll try and get that this week, but I've got a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, thanks. I don't know, Anna, if there's anything to say on workers this week.
No, I've been mostly concerned with speed stuff.
Okay. On to, we don't have miles. So moderation, I see you had do you want to give us an update, Rich, on that?
Sure. There was no significant moderation activity this week, which is as it should be. You know, the moderation team expects that most of the time there will be very little actual moderation to be doing. There was some conversation about how to make decisions quickly, some internal conversation on the moderation team about how to make decisions quickly on whether a ban should be temporary or indefinite. You know, once a concrete, you know, process is decided upon, that will be flung outward to ComCom and the TSC for approval, because the moderation team does not make policy. But we sometimes recommend policy. So that's where we're at.
Sounds good. Trevor, on async hooks?
Is it what?
Just, we have you down as a champion for async hooks. We're just wondering if there's any update in terms of, you know, progress on that front, in terms like getting out of experimental, or any major things that are going on, blockers, whatever.
Nope, I took a slight hiatus from it so I could clear my head and getting back into it right now.
Great. And then the last one is V8 currency. I don't think we have Michael Zasso this week, so that's probably it for the review. Next is moving on to issues in the Node.js Node repo, with the first one being 18090 about the collaborator nomination process. So I know Joey had put together and captured at the bottom of that, if people want to open it up, some of the questions she wants to go through with the team. Joey, you want to take that?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question is, who can nominate a collaborator? And does that has to be done by a TSC member? So in practice, we have non-TSC collaborators nominate people before, and they got onboarded, and it worked out. But I think in the governance document, is required. It somehow implies that the nomination has to come from a TSC member. So just want to make sure if everyone is okay with what we currently have right now. If that's okay, then we need to change the government. We need to make it explicit in the governance doc.
Yeah, I think there seems to be consensus in the thread that changing the doc to say that any collaborator can nominate would be a good thing. I think the doc is actually kind of unclear, and
it is unclear.
Way, and so we might as well.
The governance doc is very unclear.
Yeah. Anyway,
it says the TSC has a responsibility for managing the collaborator base, but doesn't say anything about who can actually nominate.
Okay, so any objections to making it to say collaborators can nominate? Great.
No objection. I like that.
Okay.
So question is, would we potentially be having collaborators on board other collaborators, or just having TSC members on board other collaborators?
It's a separate question.
No,
well,
that has
I'm
to
not
be
sure
done
if it
by
really is.
Because only TSC members have access to the collaborators team. The collaborators,
Okay, right.
I don't think we have collaborators who have admin access to that team. So
only TSC members should onboard. In my opinion.
yeah, because like go ahead.
Sorry, if you're going to formalizing the fact that every collaborator can nominate, I think the best way would be to actually ask for a single issue per collaborator that we want to nominate, because otherwise the discussion is not great. Maybe it's a later point, so I just want to flag, because
I think Joey have some stuff in here about how what the process should look like, and it might not involve opening an issue at the start, because that has its own problems.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about it later. Yes, that's my only concern is it's okay as long as we change the way we nominate people.
And it also, and if we have any collaborator can nominate a new collaborator, we need to make sure that the TSC members are paying attention to that and raising objections where necessary. So it does require all of us to be more aware.
So I just want to kind of go over my point really quick. So while the governance doc did say that only TSC members could, officially nominate, so like what ended up happening was, yeah, we had regular collaborators nominating each other, and then the TSC members would essentially back that, right? So that doesn't really matter if it's only the TSC onboarding people, because automatically, if the TSC is the only people onboarding people, then at least one TSC member is, essentially nominating them, right? So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Michael, are you taking minutes? Because I can't do
I can write at the same time that I'm talking.
Rich is
So
taking notes. Rich is taking notes.
Okay, good. So I think we can put down as we will raise a PR to update the governance doc to reflect that. Okay, the second question is whose objection can block a nomination, since we don't actually vote on nominations. In practice, is the collaborators, and I think we have consensus that collaborators have a say in that. It's just that if it actually comes down to a vote, only TSC members can vote, but I think that's unlikely to happen. So yeah, that's basically is included in what we should update in that pull request, I believe. Everybody good with that?
Are we able to have that just say that it's consensus driven like everything else?
Yeah. Okay. The third question is what needs to be done from our end. Prior to the nomination, should we have private discussions before the public nomination? I put that down because like the current way that we do things, we are looking for objections in public, but the nominations are not, they are not as they're more personal than technical matters, and it's hard to raise objections in public that way because the nominees are not asking to get their contribution judged in public. So even if someone do have objections, they might not, they might refrain themselves from raising the objection in public. And I don't think that's very healthy, the current way we do things. So so the question is, should we have private discussions for the nomination? Like encourage people to post something in the private discussion on GitHub?
The one concern over saying you have a private discussion beforehand, you know, then people could have the concern that, you know, without them knowing, they could be proposed, somebody objects, they don't get, you know, they don't get approved, and they never knew or had a chance to defend themselves. It's kind of the
but
it could be baked into the process that if a collaborator is rejected, some you know, nomination, some private, you know, notification to that effect that, like, you know, you know, that like we need to put together some constructive feedback or something. That has its own issues, perhaps. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but the current way is, even if someone do raise objections after the nomination, they tend to do it in private, and we tend to resolve it in private. Like even if we want to give the nominee the opportunity to defend themselves, we don't really want them to do that in public anyways. So if we have private discussions before the nomination, we are still going to resolve that in private. So I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I'm just, you know, I was being the devil's advocate in terms of, as long as we define the process so that it's clear that it will be, you know, the person who gets nominated will actually know and can participate in the process, then that probably addresses that concern, right? Like I'm not that worried that it's going to happen. I'm just, you know, we sometimes have people expressing concerns over the perception, or that, you know, it's making sure that things are transparent, right? I do agree with, you know, you don't want people, if it's not going to go through, it's not great to have a big discussion in public.
So question. So on the previous point, since if we're going to have collaborators be able to like essentially block a nomination or just whatever you want to call that? How is that going to work with doing like a more private thing where the nomination isn't initially public? Because we have a lot of collaborators, and it's going to essentially have, if we have to give it to all of them, it's essentially going to have to be public anyways, right? So what's the difference there, really?
I don't know. We have a moderation board that's private, and that has a lot more people having access to it. So I think the collaborator discussion page on GitHub, is a viable option if we want to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the discussion page as well.
Right. I'm not sure if this is really quite so serious as moderation are saying, though. So I'm not sure there's much difference for it. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look,
so,
I agree with.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. So I wasn't suggesting that we should or it is required to have private discussions. It's just that if the people doing the nomination are uncertain about the nomination, if they want to know what other collaborators think about this before they proceed, they can raise the private discussion. But if they are pretty confident that there will be no objections, they can go ahead go ahead and raise the nomination. It's not actually required, it's just suggested. And I just want to make sure that people are okay with that, to do it in private before the public part. Yeah.
So the conclusion here is nominations should be raised in private before being raised in public. Is that right, Shui?
If the people doing the nomination think it is necessary. If they think it's not, then they can just go ahead.
So basically, you have 2 avenues to do it. And
yeah.
So it sounds like I'm going to the public one at some point.
I agree with Francisca on this should be. She raised this point in an email. Onboarding collaborators should be really easy. Like, it shouldn't be hard at all to become a collaborator. And the less friction we have, the better. There will be objections, there'll be occasional objections for good reason, but those are not going to be of the type that you might get for a TSC or a moderation action. It has to be relatively serious, or relatively concerning to be rejected from that. And I think if we at least allow some space to have a private discussion amongst ourselves, if it's gated by the TSC and we have a private discussion about the individuals, then we ought to be allowing for that in that process. That should enable that gating of relatively serious concerns, rather than them just slipping through. But in terms of nomination, it just should be easy, and the bar should be fairly low. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, because I just want the public part to be more welcoming, instead of we are actually seeking for objections in public for a nomination, because that's not that's kind of awkward. Yeah.
As long as we make it obvious that there is an avenue to register objections, you have them, and that is somewhat private. And
yeah. Okay, so I think we are good with that. I can probably include that in the pull request, saying something like, if you are if you have doubts, or if you just want to make sure, you can raise a discussion in the discussion page. Okay. So the fourth question is, what should a nomination look like? So I was thinking about generate a template automatically according to the activity of the nominees in the Node.js organization. I can probably do something in the Node core utils and write a tool for that. So the question, the actual question is, should we require people to open a separate issue for that? Because I noticed that we usually do it like we usually nominate multiple people at a time in the thread or in the reply, and that makes the nominees feel less welcomed, especially like if people are just using emojis and it's not particularly clear what people are expressing their attitude towards, and that's kind of like weird. So I want to make sure if everyone is okay with that we require people to open a separate issue for that.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
But I'm not fussed either way, except that a separate issue does create, there is more friction in that, but I mean, we can try it and see how it goes.
Yeah, because if people are actually concerned about a separate issue being like attracting more attention, then they should raise a discussion in discussion page before that. Because if you do have that concern, that means a private discussion is probably in place. So yeah. Okay. So I think we can put it down as we're okay with that. Like we want to require separate issues for nominations. The next question is, how long should the nomination process take? In practice, it's about 1 or 2 weeks, depending on who the people onboarding them. Like when do they find the time? Just want to make sure, like everybody is good with the time period, or do we think we should extend that, like probably to a month? Or
I don't think we should extend it, but if we make as part of the process that it gets raised in the private section of the TSC meetings, of whatever the next TSC meeting is, and then really beyond that, it would depend just on onboarding availability.
Yeah, so I think it should. So I think we should make the TSC more aware of the nomination. So we should at least require a denomination to be went through in a TSC meeting. But other than that, I don't think we need to change anything about the current period that we have.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I definitely think, like Rod said before, we want to make it easy, as low friction as we can. So not any longer would be good. Is one idea for TSC review just to add a standing issue that gets tagged into our agenda? We just ask, are there any nominations? If there are, reviews.
We could do. Rich raises a good point in the chat as well, that we could actually just use email for this as well, and email is actually a really good tool for this because it can be done asynchronously to meetings, and so maybe as long as it's been passed in front of the TSC in some form, then it's okay. How you codify that? Okay, Rich says email is better.
Yeah,
okay.
Email is better.
Yeah, okay. So maybe the person doing the onboarding, it takes responsibility for rolling that up and sending an email out to TSC members to confirm that there's no objections before moving forward.
Yeah, although we do need to discuss about who is going to do the onboarding in the next one. But yeah. Also, wait. Wait. Oh, okay. Well, I think we can move on to the next question. The last question is, who are responsible for onboarding people? It's currently like at the moment, most of the time it's Rod. It's Rich. Anna and I also do it from time to time because we are kind of like nicely distributed around the globe in terms of time zones. But we should get more TCC members involved, and I don't actually have an idea how we could organize things. Should we set up a team, or just throwing out there so people can discuss?
Let somebody else say something.
I guess like we have quite a few areas where like, you know, we have a smaller number of people involved in different things that are important. And it would always be nice to have more people in all those different things. Like I'm wondering, is this one where, you know, are we failing to onboard people quickly enough? Are the people who are doing it feeling burnt out? Is it?
Maybe what we should do is maybe Shui and I, and if she wants, Anna and any other interested parties can discuss offline, either an email or just our own little hangout. Just, you know, figure out what is working, what isn't working, and maybe if we have some recommendations or if we think the status quo is okay. Does that work for you, Shui?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
sounds great. And if I think if you actually need more people doing onboarding, then just let us know, because it sounds like it's a fairly straightforward process with the script that we've got.
Exactly. That's sort of what I was getting to. Like if there's something we need to address, there's probably people who would volunteer, but I think, but they may be willing, they may be happy to do it if there's a need, but they will do something else if it's not a need, right, kind of thing.
We could probably open a separate issue in the TSC repo to discuss about onboarding, I think.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that's all. We can move on to the next agenda items, I think.
Okay.
Thanks for all that, Joy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for digging into that. There's definitely a lot of work. The next one was issue number 18131. ESM provide named exports for all built-in libraries. So, James, you put that on the agenda?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a fairly significant one. Basically what this PR does, the short version, is when one of the core modules is loaded, the ESM module record is also produced when we're using the experimental modules flag. So if I did import import some function from a core module, right? So import create hash from crypto, that would work. And we'd actually have named imports working from our CommonJS core modules. The challenge is with some of the limitations. So this issue first got flagged because the PR explicitly filtered out underscore prefixed properties from the named imports. And some users, like John David Dalton, said, nope, we should just export everything. So if it's accessible on the CommonJS module, it should be accessible to named imports. So things that our policies say are internal API, but are still, because of legacy reasons, it's still accessible, would still be able to be used. So some prefix property would still be accessible through these named imports. The challenge is because of the way ESM named imports work and the module record works, we would not be able to deprecate those with a deprecation message the same way that we do today. So with CommonJS, the way we do it now is just add a getter on the module export, right? And then say, okay, this property is deprecated. So the first time somebody gets that deprecation message is printed, and then we could let them know that it's going away. That would not be possible with ESM. either the property does not get exported, so it's, you know, so all of a sudden it just disappears from the ESM, which breaks code, or the deprecation message would get printed every time anybody loads anything from that module because of the way the ESM module record is built, which is not ideal because we don't want those messages just printed all the time.
So,
so that's
okay.
that's one problem. The second problem is that there are certain properties on a couple of our modules that are actually getter setters or immutable properties on the module itself that have an impact on the code. One example of this is default encoding on the crypto module. We would be able to, using the default export of an ESM, change that value. But it would actually depend on how the person structures their import statement on whether that property would actually be mutable or not. So there's a usability concern there.
So I wonder if the deprecation issue should be a separate issue rather than, I mean, it's related to, you know, the conversation happening in that named exports thing, but I wonder if it should be opened as a separate issue because the deprecation story you know, as you point out, it needs to be worked out for ESM. And we don't know what it looks like yet. It may require change to our deprecation policy. It may, you know, we need to figure out what that's going to look like. But I also wonder if I posted this in the chat, but I wonder if we want to actually just, the conversation in the issue tracker right now is pretty active, and it doesn't seem to, although there isn't a resolution, it's not, you know, yet at a complete impasse. And I wonder if we should let it run another week. And that gives you know, if conversation doesn't move anywhere in that week, then we can pick it up then, and we'll have the benefit of being able to loop in, you know, Miles and, you know, and Bradley if we want, and Guy and whoever else if we want other observers for that conversation.
Right. We do have a time check.
That is important. You know, and I think we definitely need to give it time, but we need to make sure that everyone here is aware of it. So it's not just a decision being made on the shoulders of a couple of us, like Rod points out in the chat.
So
it is a very contentious issue. It is getting a lot of attention, not just in our tracker, but also on Twitter. There was a proposal put out from NPM Inc. last week that, you know, where they created a fork that makes ESM first class, and the whole proposal on how to make this happen. It's kind of reinvigorated a lot of the public interest in this. So it is a hot topic, and it does deserve all of us giving our attention to it. So we don't have to decide anything today, but please be aware of the issue and come up to speed on the concerns and the issues so that a decision can be made. So we will need to make a decision.
Okay, so the main thing I need to make sure is in the minutes that the TSC needs to pay attention to this because it's going to come back to us. It's like there's almost no doubt.
I think it would be handy, like you were suggesting, to break it out into the different issues. Like the deprecation one sounds like, forgetting the underscore properties, that's going to have to be figured out anyway, right?
Yeah, but it's still very related to this issue then, and the fact that, well, even if a new issue spun up, like, it's going to block this one.
I reckon we can move on, but I would say that anyone engaged in these particular topics that really need TSC attention, don't be afraid to use email to get maximum TSC attention.
Right, like one thing I would say for sure is I don't think we should actually land this until we have had a chance to look at the deprecation story.
Yeah, it's fair enough to link them in that way. Okay, so at this point, I think, you know, we only have a few minutes left, so it sounds like, you know, the tension's been raised, and I agree with Rod. If email is a good way to pull people in and get discussion going there as well as just, you know, if everybody's the call to action to get involved there. It's okay if everybody okay if we move on to the next issue?
Yes.
Okay, the last one we have on the agenda is tagged in the Node.js admin repo, number 33, GitHub owner positions. I think we've discussed, we discussed earlier one related to this. I don't know, Rich, I think you opened this. Is there anything more to discuss on this one?
No, I think we covered it with your other PR.
Okay, so should we actually just close 33 or?
I'll take a look at it and decide whether to close it or whether it just needs the agenda thing removed.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're down at the end of the hour and the end of the agenda, so I think we can just take a few minutes for questions and answers. Are there any questions? Usually we ask Jeremiah. Jeremiah, I did hear you, but Rod, maybe you have access to the live stream since you're streaming?
I mean, anyone has access to it. You could just go and look at it. But
yeah, both Jeremiah are on there chatting away. There's no questions so far, but if they come up, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Anyone in the live stream, let us know.
So maybe we'll give, if you
Deekshaw was interacting with the meeting as we were going on. I don't think there's anything that we can back up to logically there, but I don't know. Maybe we should we could consider making a practice of feeding in comments from the live stream as they come in if we see an opening.
Okay.
In future meetings.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, I guess if there's no questions there, we'll close the public session. I think everybody should stick around just for a few minutes afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll figure out this stream. Bye, everyone in the public stream.